Hello, and welcome to the next in our series of Facebook Live broadcasts. So we're continuing the conversation about healing, and this session we're going to look a bit more closely at hope. So I'm Mary Griffiths, and I'm joined today by my colleagues Lizzie and Lorna. So we had to have a bit of a Google and a bit of a think about what hope meant to us. But one definition that I really like, that hope is our assessment of our future, of how we see it. So the more potential positives we see in that future, or the more important those positives are to us, the greater our hope is or can be. Because without hope, we're really hopeless. And with that comes a feeling of not having control of our lives. And we can get really stuck, and it can feel a really helpless place. Having hope helps us heal and recover from difficult things. So both physically, there's proven better results from operations the more hopeful people are, and also emotionally from difficult life events. Having hope is really key to recovery, I think. You may find hope in yourself and your abilities. You may, generate it from within. So, for example, I know that I've coped well with a certain situation or a similar situation in the past. So I can do that again. I can cope with it. Or it may be more confident about your abilities. So I know that I'm stubborn, or I'm determined, or I have humour. So I think or I know that I hope that can get me through difficult things in the future. I have confidence in that. And Lorna, you were going to talk to us a little bit about COVID as well. It always comes back to COVID, doesn't it? And hope.
And before I talk about COVID, I'll just say I am very hopeful that my dogs won't bark, but please excuse me if they do. But yeah, looking at definitions, I was looking at the dictionary, and it defines hope as a desire for something which is a possibility of fulfillment. And I think the whole thing about COVID and during the pandemic is that we've been very hopeful of a vaccine. Well, we've seen that hope come to fruition. There are 3 viable vaccines now. And I think that's something that's extraordinary and brilliant. And the other thing that tends to happen during pandemics, or historically has anyway, is that after a pandemic, society changes. So one of my major hopes at the moment that actually society will change for better. What that shape or form will take, I don't know, but I'm hopeful. And it could be that we're all working from home more, which could help things like the environment and our own family lives to have an improvement there. And that's it, really. That's my major hope right now.
Definitely, Lorna. And I think for me, my son and my family, my husband and friends, they keep me hopeful as well. When I think about a future, I think about things I want to do with them, or places I want to go with them. And that gives me a lot of hope, I think. And also when I think about when I've been in quite a dark place, my friends, family, they've absolutely given me hope. They've been hopeful for me. And we talk about others holding the hope for you, and I think you can really lean on that. If you can't see it yourself, if others are hopeful for you, that can really help. And but lots of other people find religion really hopeful. Gives them a lot of a sense of positivity and hope. But for me, I'm not personally religious, but I do think if you think of spirituality in its more general sense as something bigger than ourselves, nature for me is really hopeful. Our planet as well. I find it really recharging and healing. And for me, it's hopeful in the sense that it's unaffected by anything difficult or wrong in my life at the time. I know, Lizzie, you find nature similar as well, don't you?
Yeah, I'll definitely agree with you there, Mary. I think nature and kind of earth in general, I find very hopeful for me. I think spending time in nature does keep me positive, and I find it really healing. I think the thing with nature as well, I quite like the kind of cyclical change of the seasons. So obviously spring and summer we feel are quite they're periods which are quite hopeful, and then autumn and winter, when things are kind of winding down, the leaves are falling from the trees, we know that actually if we get through that, then spring will give us new life. And I think that can be quite a nice metaphor for us to take on board with our own lives as well, that from when we're in the middle of a difficult patch, the winter, that spring will come and we can be hopeful that things will get better. I think when I'm feeling less hopeful and when I'm thinking about nature and the planet, I can start to worry a little bit about the kind of environmental issues that are going on and climate change and that kind of thing. But I think with that, it's really important to remember all the kind of positive, hopeful changes that are happening. We're finding greener ways of living, more eco-friendly ways of living, and one hopeful thing from COVID that Lorna touched on actually is that our ways of living and working have now changed, and we're working in a much more kind of environmentally friendly way. So we can find hope even in really difficult times. And I think in terms of speaking generally in terms of hope, I think there's lots of benefits to being hopeful. Things like it reduces our risk of anxiety, stress and depression, increases our resilience, and just helps us to kind of have a better sense of well-being. And what I really liked is that if we're not kind of generally hopeful people, it is something that we can practice and something that we can work on. And I just wanted to share a few kind of tips that can help us to be more hopeful. So things like Mary mentioned earlier on, kind of really focusing on what your own individual strengths and abilities are. Practicing gratitude. So I think we've touched on before about maybe writing a gratitude list and kind of acknowledging a few things each day that you're grateful for. Trying to reframe any negative thoughts that we might be having. Being careful with how much we watch the news, especially at the moment, although slightly more hopeful at the minute. Being careful with how much social media we use. Spending time with hopeful people. I think that's a really big one for me. And also holding on to those little glimmers of hope that sometimes we do have when we're in a dark place, and giving those glimmers lots of attention and acting on them. What about you, Lorna?
Well, I was thinking about your glimmers of hope, but not because they're tiny glimmers. But one of my massive things about hope for the future is our youth. People, I think, have said for eternity, or the youth of today. But actually, we were once the youth of today. And when we look at our youth of today, they do nothing but inspire me. They are the people who are fighting for our futures. They are the ones that are really engaged in the process. And I know we see negative press about them on TV or on Facebook or on social media, but the vast majority of them are really thoughtful, wonderful people. You know, the one that's talking, you mentioned the environment, and we mustn't go on about the environment, but Greta Thunberg, it's taken a young girl to really take the world by storm and the climate crisis. And it's our youth that are going to change our future. And I think the important thing about hope is to, rather than concentrate on the minutiae of our own lives, is to look outside of ourselves. And if we look outside of ourselves and look at the bigger picture, there are masses of hope out there. You know, the world has always been through crisis, and it's always young people that see us through in the end. And on that note, I think it just leaves us to say that we really hope to see you for our next video. So take care and keep well. Bye.